Getting about $345 million plus some tax incentives. What, in the end, when all these deals are completed, what amount do you think will be flowing to the sector?
So I've said that I'm not going to talk about specific dollar amounts because there are ongoing negotiations. But the panel made it clear that that there needed to be different revenue sources. We are going to work to put those in place. The reality is that the industry is going to be smaller than it was, and we've said that all along. We said that a sustainable horse racing industry is going to be a smaller industry, and that's a reality that I know that the industry is confronting, and we're going to work through this transition with them.
The government has called the 346 a subsidy. Whatever number you end up in the end, is it still a subsidy to the horse racing industry?
You know what? I think there was an arrangement in place. That arrangement is changing. The industry is evolving, and we are going to work with them. I don't think labeling or parsing the semantics around particular words is going to be helpful at this juncture. I think what we need to do now is we need to say, okay, what is in the best interest of the industry? How do we make sure we protect the animals? How do we make sure that we protect jobs? And how do we make sure that we have a viable industry for the people who want to take part in that industry, who want to enjoy it? So it's about the jobs, it's about tourism, it's about the vibrant industry that has been in this province evolving to a place where it can be sustainable. And we know as government we've got a role to play in that.
OLG has slot machines in racetracks, and in compensation, the racetracks industry was receiving $345 million. Now OLG is going to be renting space. How much is that rent going to cost?
So the financial model is changing. Okay, and no matter how many ways you come at the numbers, I'm not going to be talking about exactly what the number is in terms of the transition. You're talking about the rent, and I don't know if anybody's got those rent numbers, John or Elmer. Right. So those rent, I think the rent agreements have all been finalized with the 14 tracks, but we don't have the exact numbers. So there are 14 rent agreements in place with each of the tracks, but the transition agreements aren't all in place. So I don't have those numbers, and it doesn't sound like we have a total number, but the rent agreements, the slot rent agreements are in place, and we're working on the transition agreements.
How close is it going to be to the 345?
I can't tell you that. I don't know.
Previously, the argument of the previous government was that this money would be better spent on education and healthcare. Why should government coffers, actually this is lottery money, this is government-controlled money, be putting anything into an industry like horse racing? Why shouldn't it be being spent on education and healthcare?
So I'm going to make a comment, and then I'm going to ask members of the panel to weigh in on this. But my contention is that there's room in Ontario for horse racing and healthcare and education. I don't think that we need to make those choices entirely. The reality is that the amount of money that was part of that agreement is going to change. It is changing, and so we've been clear about that. Having said that, we need a horse racing industry, and we need obviously strong healthcare and education. Those are huge priorities. So I'm going to ask my panel members. John?
Great.
Yeah.
That's a great question, Mike. I think if you remember when the final report was when the final report was released, the work of Elmer and John and I, we said, what is in the public interest versus what was going on? Going forward, our advice, our consensus advice, is that any new arrangement had to be accountable, had to be transparent, that the industry had to be focused on the customer, and that any money from the government going to the industry would be returned plus more by way of taxes, because this industry generates HST and income taxes back to the government. So we said that's the way that you look at it from a good public policy. That was not the case under the old system, which is why we agreed that it needed to be reformed, but it's exactly why under this new arrangement you will have a relationship between the government and the industry which is accountable, which is transparent, which is based not on slot machines, but on the customer for the horse racing industry. and as well that it'll provide for Minister Sousa a positive rate of return, and that's what's good for taxpayers.
What's the positive rate of return?
Anything above zero. A plus is better than a negative. It was negative.
the line.
It will be positive.
What is it going to be this time?
Well, as the Premier said, last time my background is in business. One does not negotiate with the industry, with all of you people in the room discussing the amounts. The best thing is that we have agreements in principle for the 14 tracks. When it comes to them being able to rent their facilities to OLG, beyond that, we now have 6 of the 14 tracks have indicated a willingness to be part of this new model. Those 6 tracks represent some 80% of all the wagering that happened last year in the province of Ontario. So this is a very positive development, and there's more work to be done.
Madame la Première ministre, je pense que Dwight Duncan parlait de 9 millions d'heures de soins à domicile, 28 000 arthroplastiques qui pouvaient être faits grâce à ces 345 millions de dollars. Qu'est-ce qui est le plus important sur le gouvernement?
Pour moi, c'est important que l'industrie peut avoir un avenir parce qu'il y a des emplois, plus de jobs et pour l'économie de l'Ontario rural, c'est une industrie très importante. Et nous avons aussi besoin, c'est clair, d'un système de santé qui est très fort et d'éducation, mais il y a place pour une industrie horse racing et aussi pour l'éducation et la santé.
When the slots are going to shut down at Flamborough Downs on April 1st, are negotiations going on with them, and how are they going?
There are negotiations going on with all of the tracks, and the owners and the operators will have to make a decision about whether they are willing to be part of the new model. But that's the conversation that's happening right now. And I was in Flamborough last weekend, and I know that that conversation's ongoing.
Premier, you're liberal. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, didn't you just say that all the slot agreements had been...
The slot agreements have been finalized, but the transition agreements have not been finalized. They're only with the 6 tracks. That
Can you please put a ceiling on the amount of money, taxpayer money, that you're willing to pump into this industry?
You know what? John can take that. John can take that. But the reality is that we are in conversation with the tracks. We're talking about transition money. What we're saying is that we understand that there needs to be a transition period in order for the industry to adjust to a new model. And I think that's what the sober second thought, that's what the transition panel allowed us to do, was to have an opportunity to work with the industry to move it to a different model. And I think that it will be a more sustainable model over the long term.
How long, you said a transition period then. Does that mean that this is going to, some of these agreements are 2 years, some are 3 years?
These are 3-year agreements that have been negotiated with the 6 tracks.
Would we be back to negotiating rent space, or are we looking to...
You know what? We'll have a conversation then, okay?
Okay, will we know then what the dollar figure is for today's stuff?
Yeah, we just
I
understand. I also understand that I want the negotiations to be able to proceed in good faith, and so we're not going to talk about dollar amounts at this point. John, do you want to add something?
Yeah, thank you, Premier. So to be clear, in our report, we recommended to the government a couple of things. One is that the government needed to do a negotiation, a full open book discussion with the tracks. I think the tracks present here today will tell you that was a very robust conversation. I think that's how they would describe it, so that we could get a better description, a better handle on the costs in this industry. Frankly, 6 months or 8 months ago, there really wasn't a good basis of data on which to build a good and prosperous industry in Ontario, and we're putting together those numbers now. We also recommended to the government that none of the financial recommendations that we made be made public until those negotiations were complete, for obvious reasons that aggregate number would prejudice those conversations. They're ongoing now. You mentioned Flamborough with the Great Canadian Gaming folks. We met with them as early as a few days ago, so that conversation's ongoing. And to release the aggregate numbers in advance of the successful completion of all of those agreements, I think would prejudice the taxpayers and the government of Ontario. So that was our recommendation. The government's following through on
But
it. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you, John. I just want to say that I am confident that we are going to be able to complete those negotiations.
Last question.
Are there two? Yeah.
Organization.
The breeding side of the industry has consistently felt they've slipped through the cracks. And when they hear the details of this, I don't think they're going to feel any different. What do you say to that horse industry?
Well, what I would say is that I understand from the breeding side that they want stability. They want to know what is coming because their work is future work, right? So what I would say to them is that we're committed to a sustainable industry, not just today, but into the future. I mean, what John Snoblin just said about, really looking at what the costs are, understanding how the industry works, and how it can sustain itself into the future. That's what this exercise has been about. So, I would want to say to the breeders that I hope that they take some comfort from the fact today that I've said that we're reaching agreement with Trax. Trax are seeing that they're going to be able to move into a new model, and I hope that will take numbers of them into the long term, which should be good news for breeders.
Kathleen, you were at a dinner last night, and you probably heard about the controversy with Sarah Thompson, saying that the mayor inappropriately grabbed her derriere. I don't know if there's an appropriate way to do that, but anyway, that's the allegation from her. Did you hear anything? You were at the dinner last night. Did you hear any such thing?
I was at the CJPAC reception. I had left before Mayor Ford arrived. I did see Sarah Thompson there, but as I say, it was before Mayor Ford arrived, so I know nothing about it.
Will OLG now be administering, you talked about merging horse racing with the provincial strategy. The provincial gaming strategy is the Ontario Lottery and Gaming Corporation. Will OLG now be administering horse racing in Ontario?
So I would like to see the integration of the policy, yeah. And I don't know whether is Elmer still here? Did he? No, Elmer's gone. I don't know if John or John want to comment on their recommendation because it was their recommendation we're acting on.
Yeah, Keith, what we found is that you can see in other jurisdictions around the world that where there's an integration of the gaming policy and horse racing, that you have a number of very sustainable models. There are many of them. There's things like the V75 and the PMU in Europe. There's sports betting. There's racinos around the world. And where we see that there's a good relationship, a symbiotic relationship between gaming and horse racing, you have a sustainable, vibrant horse racing industry. We could not find any other jurisdiction that didn't have that relationship that had a sustainable horse racing industry, which is why we heard loud and clear from the industry it was important that that be integrated from a policy point of view, and we're just delighted that the Premier has decided that that's a recommendation that's key to be able to have a future for the industry, because that's what they're waiting to hear. Is there a future? And that is actually I would say an extremely important aspect for those people who are in the industry to see that there is a future that is going to be sustainable based on best practices around the world. Those practices governments around the world think are beneficial for taxpayers.
Would we even be here today if the government wasn't so ham-fisted last year in slamming the industry to begin with?
We said we needed a second look at this issue. And so we took it, and that's why Minister McMeekin set up the panel. I'm very grateful to them for their work, and I'm very pleased that we've gotten to today. So thank you, everybody. Thanks for being here.
What message do you have for the people of Northburg?
So I've been clear that we need to insert more local autonomy into the processes around the green energy siting and projects, and so the Minister of Energy is working on that as we speak. And it's very important to me that we continue to produce green renewable power, but I also know that more community input and more community buy-in is necessary. We need that willing host component, and that's what the Minister of Energy is working on. Okay.
Refers to the new Ontario government. Are you so different from your predecessor? And I guess this is one area where you might be that you consider yourself a new government.
Well, we went through a process. We've got a new premier, and it's International Women's Day. I will just comment, just saying. And we have a new cabinet, and we're moving on. I mean, we're building on the foundation, as I've said. We're building on the foundation that the previous administration put in place. And I'm very proud of the work that was done over the last 9.5 years. But there are some things that we're going to do going forward that will be different. And so to that extent, we're a new government building on what was done by my predecessor. Thanks, everybody. Merci.